want to give up is the exact moment you need to keep going. That's where your strength lies. That's where change happens. And this is from an unknown quote. From an unknown, the quote is from an unknown person. And yes, as I just said, that I'm not going to be looking into the education situation and the school environment, because in Zimbabwe there's a lot of journals and information and research that has been carried out that is to do a lot with like inclusion in schools, inclusion in the education system, and that sort of thing. So that would be a topic that I will do in a separate session, right? So why am I looking at risks in public places? What's the importance, what's the significance of looking at risk in public places? And to answer this, I'm going to be using a research study carried out in a place called Selangoh. And if you notice on the autism awareness, there were the previous posts had references. The references are where I was sort of getting some information and referring to, because you know when people do research, those are the closest to what we can call evidence, you know, what's available basically, so we can know and inform, you know, we can inform ourselves about, you know, autism awareness and different things that we need to, you know. So to support this topic today, I have actually looked at the Selangoh paper, the one that is the one that says public awareness on the characteristics of children with autism in Selangoh. You'll see that's #1 on the reference list in the previous post. Okay, so Selangoh is a place in Malaysia, and well, I found it as a relatable research. I found that the findings were relatable to Zimbabwe and even to a number of other African countries. So so I've used that. So if you want to read more on that topic, on that paper, you can actually just go on the reference and then you put that on Google. It will access. It's actually a free research piece, so you'll be able to read through for yourself. Okay, so the main reason #1 is to raise public awareness. Okay, to raise public awareness of autism. So the findings from this Selangoh paper are when you raise awareness about autism, that leads to public an increase in public awareness. Okay, and that also then leads to a more understanding and tolerance of autistic individuals and families, and that also leads to more support from the public and tolerance towards autistic individuals and their families. So do you think, I'm going to ask a question, whether if you want to respond in the comments or if you just want to, you know, just ask amongst yourself, do you think that Zimbabweans in general are aware of autism? Or do you think that they understand the characteristics of autism? Or they've just heard the name autism, but they're not really sure what it entails? Okay. Then the second reason would be for the public to get the good information, accurate information directly from the source. And in this case, I mean information directly from people like us, the parents of children with who are autistic, the people impacted by autism, or even from individuals impacted by autism. And the third reason would be one-to-one. The third reason for assessing risk in public, assessing and managing risks, is, let's say your child, you're giving your child one-to-one support, and you have other children, because some people have more than one child who is on the spectrum, or maybe you want to make a balance. You have other children, but then you have an autistic child, and you need to give that child one-to-one support. So you sometimes take them out, and you need to know, you know, how to be safe. You know, all those things they matter, right? So, right, let's see. I'm just following my notes because I wrote quite a lot of things here. So I think, yeah, if the people in Zimbabwe they will become more aware of autism when they are able to access good information, accurate information, and that's directly from the sources. And yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do is, what I've done actually, I've split the risks into 4 categories. So the first category, if you want, you can take notes. It's up to you. The first category is safety, and then issues in the public realm. That's issues when you go out in public. Then number 3 is inappropriate behaviors. Number 4 is fears and phobias. Okay. And then what I've also done is I've also split it into 2 parts. So I'm going to talk about the risks to the autistic person, and then I'm going to talk about the risks to other people, which include the parent or the caregiver of the autistic individual. Okay, so shall I say that again? I've split the risks into 4 categories. First is safety. Second is the issues in the public realm. That is when you go out, and all things to do with the public realm. Third is inappropriate behaviors. And then 4th is fears and phobias. Okay, so I'm going to go into them and elaborate. Okay, so we're talking about the risks to the autistic person in those 4 categories. Okay, and I think tomorrow we'll talk about the risks in those categories, but for other people, on the risks to other people, including the parents or the caregivers. Right, if anyone is out there, just wave, let me know you're there. Okay, so we're talking about safety. Safety is very, very important. Safety is very, very important. Things like crossing the road. Some autistic children they don't know how to cross the roads. They are not aware of safety when it comes to crossing the roads. And depending which country you live in, for example, in the United Kingdom, you still, the driving is slightly different because they are the pelican crossing, the zebra crossings, and drivers are meant to stop. And they have to give the pedestrian has right of way. Whereas in some countries, the cars just go, like, you got to jump on the road. I've seen some mad driving in South Africa. You got to jump. And autistic people would need a lot of support. A lot of autistic children will need a lot of support when it comes to crossing roads. Okay. And it's an issue of how to teach the child or hold their hand, ensure they're safe when you're out on the roads. Then navigating, finding your way home, finding your way to different places. Some autistic children or individuals do not know how to navigate and find their way to different places. For example, I think I mentioned in a previous video, my son, for example, he's 7 years old, and he will, if or even my daughter who's 17 years old, if I were to just open the door and let them out, they wouldn't even be able to come back home. If they go, they won't even be aware. They'll just go and they won't be able to come back home. So it's a matter of navigating the way. They need supervision. They would need someone to accompany them to go from place A to place B. They might become familiar with with some environments because they live there or something like that. But for them to go to school or to the shop would be almost impossible without someone supervising or without someone accompanying them. So that is an important thing. Traveling, the transport mode. Traveling to different places. It could be by bus, by plane. In Zimbabwe, they are combis. Some call them taxis, like in South Africa. Then there's the buses, the Zupco buses. Some people have cars, some children walk. So travel is an important factor when it comes to safety. How are you going to be traveling? How do you travel with your child or with your autistic family member, even if they're an adult? Some children would need things like wheelchairs, accessibility for wheelchairs. How is accessibility for wheelchairs in Zimbabwe? Right, just accessing toilets, public toilets, accessing buildings. There was an issue in Zimbabwe, which was a bit close to home, where a young boy, obviously we'll keep these anonymous, a young boy who has cerebral palsy was given a wheelchair, but this wheelchair was these old-fashioned type of wheelchairs, and it had like a chain on the wheelchair, and then the young boy put his finger in the chain, and one thing led to the other, and the young boy lost his finger. So these are some of the things that should really be addressed. Certain type of unsafe equipment when it comes to travel should be even abolished, thrown away, and new things, safe wheelchairs should be used. So these are factors that need to be looked into. Okay, going on combis, like if you're in Zimbabwe, will they understand that your child or autistic individual, if they sort of present different behaviors, how would they respond? Would you have to explain yourself? Just if there's a general awareness, then travel will be made even easier. In the United Kingdom, and probably in many other places, I suppose, they have priority seats, let's say in buses. So those places, they even have the correct signage for priority seats. So you know that if someone has a certain disability or elderly person, this would be their priority seating. And even if there's someone else sitting there who is not disabled, they would have to actually stand up and let the disabled person sit. So if someone has issues, with mobility, then these priority seats are left for them. So I'm not sure if that principle is applied in Zimbabwe. I'm not sure because I've never actually used the latest Zupco buses. So let me hear from you what your experiences are when it comes to traveling with your autistic child or autistic individual or family member or loved one. And if share it, and other people can also have a read and see, just what it's about or what things are like. Then there's issues of seat belts. If you have your personal car, the issue of seat belts when it comes to autistic children, sometimes autistic children do not want the seat belt, and it is really risky, obviously, to move around without your seat belt. But then you find some children, they don't want that seat belt because it's uncomfortable. But then you have to do some research, because there are some seat belts that are made specifically for autistic children, and as well as trying to encourage them to keep the harness on, because obviously it's for their safety. What you don't want is a situation where you're driving and your child is up and about in the back seat. That's a high risk. If anything can happen, if you brake, your child is gonna fall or crash or what, I don't know. So it's really another factor to consider. Right, so then there's being alone in public, right, or without supervision. Okay, the capacity issue. When I say capacity, I'm talking about how competent is your child or the autistic individual when it comes to being left alone in a public place. There's the issue of strangers being alone, you don't know who your child is with, where your child is. I think I'll throw in the issue of abandonment as well. Sometimes the child will feel insecure, they'll feel lost, they'll feel abandoned without the safety of somebody that they trust, without the safety of someone who's supposed to be caring for them. I've heard a number of situations where the autistic child is abandoned. And if you look into some of the care homes in Zimbabwe, a number of children who are abandoned are autistic, because the parents cannot, or they feel that they cannot take care of their autistic child. Actually have been in contact with one of the care homes, and majority of the children there are autistic, and they've all been abandoned. Okay. And talking to strangers, walking with strangers, some children, they don't know how to tell faces. So for example, my son, he's 7 years old. I will give an example. There's times when you go out, maybe in the shopping mall, and whenever he sees a male, he will try to stretch out his hand, try to hug that person, try to hold or shake his hand, or hold his hand, or even just grab onto the leg or something like that. And obviously this is not a good thing. It's not comfortable because he doesn't know about safety. You can't just go holding strangers that, you know, you're just trying to hold their hands. And so it's always like you try to discourage him from doing that, or just to hold him, because he's 7 years old. So you can still kind of control him. But what happens is sometimes the other person can be caught off guard, and then they just like, you know, there's that odd look like, what's happening here? Why is he holding me? So because autism sometimes it's invisible basically, and it's invisible. So if someone doesn't know that child has autism, they're not going to guess. They're going to be caught off guard, and they will be a little bit disorientated because they don't know, like, what's this behavior? Why is this child holding me like this? So these are important things. These are important things to be aware of, and many people who do not know or understand some of the characteristics of autism are not aware of these things. Okay. And then, yeah, our kids are pretty vulnerable. They are very vulnerable because they are unaware of strangers. Some of them are unaware of strangers. And then obviously there's the issue of the abductions, kidnapping, child kidnapping. So you want to ensure that your child is safe when it comes to strangers. Then children on the autistic spectrum, many of them require supervision. Okay, hold on one second. They require supervision when going to public places. Overly, this is just for safety and guidance. Then there's water safety. So there is a reference on the lists. If you check the reference lists that I put, did you know that drowning is a leading cause of death in autism? So that reference will show you, and you can read through that paper. I think you can access that one for free. It will show you like a lot of things about child, it will show you about, sorry, let me just get this right. Right, I think I just hit something here. Oh, one second. Let me just get my notes back. Okay, it does show you information about the swimming, right? Like swimming is good for, it's good for your children. Like, for example, my daughter, she's 17, she loves to swim. But the thing is, she can't really swim. It's not easy to actually teach her how to swim, but she has a rough idea of how to swim. But the thing is, when I take her to a swimming pool, right, she's not aware. This side is the deep side, and this side is the shallow side. And so I try to avoid going to those type of pools. So I will try to take her to the shallow pools, where she'll be able to swim while I'm supervising her, because sometimes there was a time when we had a close call when she wanted to jump into the deep side because she just wasn't aware and she was overexcited. There's about two times. So this is something that you need to be careful when it comes to water safety. There's swimming pools, right? And then rivers. Then there's muddy construction sites. I remember a sad incident when I was young. And sorry, let me just drink some water. I remember a sad incident when I was young, and well, he wasn't autistic. They were just being like boys being boys, young boys being boys. But unfortunately, he got caught in the muddy waters and he actually drowned. And they weren't, like in Zimbabwe, they were open construction sites. So it's really important that some of these construction sites are not left where children can access. Okay. Then there's wells. In Zimbabwe, we have a lot of open wells. Children, especially if they're autistic, if you have a well, I'm going to say this in Shona. Kana pane mugodi pamba chengetedze saivana, especially kana vari vana vane autism. I'll translate that. I'm basically saying that if you have these open boreholes where you live, you need to really look after your autistic child, because if you're autistic, you don't want your autistic child to access that because it's very dangerous. Okay. So some autistic children, they love to swim, so they really need that supervision to ensure that they're safe. It's very good for them mentally. It's very good. It's stimulating. They learn a lot. They're able to vocalize a lot when they're swimming. They're excited. For example, my daughter, that is her favorite. She loves swimming. She comes into her element. She loves to swim, but you always have to monitor her, supervise her, and also to avoid her drinking too much of the water as well. And swimming well, especially when there are other people around, just not being too, because sometimes she tends to just get so excited, she's just splashing water on everyone and just jumping around. And so yeah, all these things are things to consider. And then I have my son. When it comes to swimming, he doesn't want his face in the water, but he likes to be held because he wants to feel safe. The safety of having that adult you trust holding you safely while you having that experience of the water just going over your skin, because he's very sensory touch, sensory. He sometimes is very if you touch him, sometimes he doesn't like it. So we're also very careful with him when we put him in water. Sorry, this session is going to be a bit long, so I'm not going to, that's why I'm saying the other part we'll do it tomorrow, because I did gather quite a lot of information when it comes to safety in public places. Okay. Right, so let me just move on to animals, dangerous animals. In Zimbabwe, obviously, there's a lot of wildlife. And my worst one is the snake. I do not like snakes, and I'm sure the people who don't like snakes are, know what I'm talking about. So our autistic kids might not know that animal is very dangerous. Yeah, because in Zimbabwe, not many people keep snakes as pets. I know here in the United Kingdom, there are some people who keep snakes as pets, but in Zimbabwe, not when I grew up, I did not know a lot of people who would keep a snake as a pet. So the last thing you want is your child trying to pick up a snake. And my children, because they've grown up in the United Kingdom, they've probably seen snakes on TV, but not in real. I don't know, I can't remember if I've showed them, but Yeah, probably at the zoo, but in real like life wildlife encounters, they have not. And I am afraid of snakes, so I wouldn't even know what I would do if, if my child tried to touch a snake. That would just give me nightmares. Then there's dogs. Children may like dogs, or they might be afraid of dogs. So you need to assess what your child, whether your child likes dogs or whether your child is afraid of dogs. It could be cats, it could be any animal. So those are things you have to, expose your child to and see whether they can tolerate these things, because you could see these dogs like in Zimbabwe, many people have dogs. We used to have dogs growing up, but I don't know whether my children will be tolerant to dogs or not. I know my daughter, who is 17, is afraid of dogs. She is afraid of dogs. She will run away from the dogs. She doesn't like dogs at all. So these are things to consider. Okay, and so you can think of other things that you can actually think of other things as well.